Hello and welcome back to Babalu B-Sides. Today we're going to dive into what it takes to tell a story using only sound. In Babalu Season 1, listeners met Louisa, a young writer who discovers a series of cassette tapes recorded by her late mother, Sherry. As we listen to Louisa navigate this discovery, we're transported into the scene with her, and that is a credit to the incredible sound design in this series. Today, we're talking about the power of sound and what it was like to create a narrative using only audio. My name is Jackie Rae Aubel, and I'm joined once again by the creative team behind this groundbreaking series. Babalu sound designer, editor, and mixer, Charles Moody, director, Catherine Chen Lerner, and series creator, Kimberly Trong. So let's get into the sound of Babalu. Charles, you are the mastermind behind the sound design, the mixing, the editing, all of this stuff. I know you have a background in film and TV production. So how was this different? Because you didn't really have visuals to anchor you to anything.
I think the biggest thing was that there was a lot more freedom than I normally get with projects. It was very open-ended as far as like building out the pacing and whether I was editing a scene to just be as tight as possible, which was a lot of our earlier edits, and then we added more space after that. Then some of them, even what was recorded during production, I ended up just throwing in like 10 seconds of empty space here, 15 seconds of empty space here, and just letting it breathe way more than it even did while recording. It was fun and a little out of the ordinary as far as like being able to have those choices on me. Normally I show up and that's already been decided on. The time can't change, and so everything kind of has to fit in there. I think it kind of gave us a chance to play around more with it.
That's awesome. So you essentially, let's actually get into the nitty gritty of actually recording this thing. So I know that you were setting up sound stages in your 1-bedroom apartment.
Sometimes, yes.
You would record the scenes with the actors, and would you essentially just be sending these raw recordings over to Charles?
Yeah, the only episode that Charles was here live for the recording was the pilot. And so everything, we have, Charles apparently has a whole like blooper reel of just me and Kat talking to him in the recordings being like, Charles, so sorry, Charles. Oh my God, Charles. Like literally, we just talked to him in the recording. So he probably has like 10 minutes of us just being like, blah, blah, blah. Okay, ignore that take. Can you, so like we would leave notes in the recording.
Always.
But yeah, it was a mixture of going to our sound engineer's friend's house who had like a whole recording studio in his basement, to sometimes in my 1-bedroom apartment. Sometimes we tried another podcast studio as well. We basically did whatever we could to make it work in regards to where we were recording. But yeah, not having Charles there was definitely a lesson that we were like, no, we can't do that again. I think there was something so powerful about him and Kat being able to connect in the recording studio live and in real time and going, yep, you know what I mean? Like doing the up, down, the thumbs up, thumbs down, which is so great because at the end of the day, like Charles, like to be there in the moment and to be able to capture it like with a few clicks right in real time is going to save us a lot in post-production, but is also just good for him to see the performances. So yeah.
So for season 2, we are planning on
all being here.
Yeah, building a little recording studio.
We're gonna build. I no longer am in a 1-bedroom apartment, thank God. And we're gonna turn one of the bedrooms into a recording studio, so we can like be the recording studio and have it within our own control. Charles already he's in my house this past week. He like told me I need to get foam on the ceilings. Like he's already made recs about like, so it's really cool to have him in the room, be like, oh, this is the room we're going to be recording in. Oh, we're going to need this. We're going to need that. Great. Cool. I will spend the next X amount of months getting that set up. So by the time you come back, we're going to be ready to roll, baby.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
You were essentially handed these, because I do podcasting as well. That's the only reason Kim asked me to do this. I have a show with y'all, but just getting these big files. And so you had a script that you could follow, but it sounds like you had to make a lot of artistic choices as you were putting these stories together. What did that feel like?
Thankfully, we did do the pilot first, and I had a little bit more idea of like, okay, this is kind of what our flow is going to be for this. But some of these we had tons of takes for.
Yeah.
And then it still didn't hit right, and then we did pickups,
Yeah.
and then I think there were a few lines that we even did secondary pickups to get the performance
Mostly
just
me.
right.
Mostly me. Not gonna lie.
The important stuff.
I mean, yeah, when you listen to your own voice afterwards and you're like, oh, dang, oh, shit.
Well, it goes back to what we were saying. When it's your show
Yep.
and you're also starring in it, it's sometimes... Kat, do you have anything you want to say to that?
No, I mean, knowing that Charles would be having such a big file, we would sometimes be like, okay, this is it, or like this is the one, Charles, or like the one was 2 times before.
Yeah.
That would happen a lot.
We should have stopped then. Sorry.
Yeah,
Sorry,
we would have
Charles.
been like, we should have stopped two times before. And so sometimes it was nice to be able to talk to Charles like he was in the room.
Yeah.
However, now having him in the room is going to be really incredible.
Yeah, it was really funny on my end because I'd listen through a take and then another one, and then finally the takes would stop, and then there'd just be like, "Oh, I'm so sorry, Charles. We're just gonna do it one more time, okay? This time I promise this will be it." and yeah, I did at one point have a full just list of the notes of them talking to me, or like apologizing for this, or like, okay, we're gonna try this one thing. Unfortunately, I don't have those bloopers anymore. They got lost.
Oh, well, I got the raws somewhere. I
Oh
got the
yeah,
raws.
I mean I've got the raws,
Yeah,
but
but
the edited together portion got lost in.
Yeah, because I remember you made. Oh man.
So, little background for the listeners. Kim and I used to be on a sketch comedy team together, and we were also neighbors across the hall.
Yep.
And Kim and I would go on walks, and normally I would ask her, "Hey, how's Babalu going? Like, what's going on with Babalu?" And one day we were going on a walk, and she goes, "The tapes have been lost." I'm like, "What?" I'm like, "What?"
Very like soap opera.
I was like, "The tapes were lost." And that's actually exactly what happened. It was April 2025.
April, right?
Yeah,
Yeah, April 2025. And for our folks, just in case you need a reminder, the show came out in October 2025. We started developing the show in 2020. So this is almost to the finish line. We lost all the tapes. So Charles, would love to hear from your point of view how that happened and how you recovered from it.
Oh,
Mentally.
yeah. Okay. Let me get ready to revisit this memory.
Memory trauma.
Seriously.
Speaking of mental health.
Yeah, my laptop bricked up on me. We had just done, I think we were maybe 2 passes away from the end. It was really, the pacing had all been pretty much decided. Most of the effects were in place. It had been mostly mixed at that point. The backgrounds were all done. And my computer just didn't start up one day. And that night before, I had been backing up to my hard drive. And whatever happened to my computer, my hard drive was completely corrupted. And so I had a secondary backup, but it was from a few months before that. So things were roughly in place, but the pacing was not what we had decided on. And there were a lot of effects that were no longer in there. I mean, I tried for several weeks to get my computer to turn back on, to try to plug it in and get the data off of it, to try to recover my broken hard drive, and none of that worked. Oof. So eventually I found that version from, I think it was around December of 2024 was the last version that I still had access to, and I had to start over. And I went through all the notes from those previous passes and just consolidated them into one long list of notes for every episode, and went through it again.
Wow.
And just to give you like an idea of the nightmare that Charles had endured, when I give notes, I mean, I give like a lot of, like, it's like in the weeds, right? I'm like, hey, can you, this one sentence, can you pluck that out and replace it with this other take of this one sentence? Like, it's that in the weeds, and Charles does an immaculate job. And so for me, when I found out like we had, like they were gone, I was like, oh my God. And it was just never it was not on my bingo card, just put it that way, right? But then Charles is like, I'm gonna start working on it again. And sure enough, like I remember getting a text from him, because we're texting a lot like during post, and he says to me, I think you said something like, hey, I'm not trying to blow smoke or something like that, but I actually think these are better somehow. And I like, cause like I wanted to like weep knowing that we lost such beautiful art that he had made and he had invested literally probably hundreds of hours into at that point. And I was like, wait, better? I don't know, man. The previous ones were really good. If you even get close to that, that's great, but better? And then I listened and I was like, oh my God, he's right. Like I don't know if it was just like hopeful thinking or whatever, my brain trying to be like, yes, it is better. But I truly do believe it was better. And I can pinpoint when I realized it. It is actually Year of the Snake, I believe, where Louisa goes to Joshua Tree and she pulls over, and then that family pulls over, and they have an awkward interaction because the daughter is a pain in the ass and she's a total brat. I say, yeah, shut the fuck up, Riley. Again, I'm listening, picture me listening to this draft. I know the scene. I'm listening to it for the first time since we lost all those files. And the dad, he reacts, but he doesn't say like, oh, whatever. You hear his like feet slide against the gravel on the ground, and I was like, oh my God, I don't think that was in there in the previous version. And it was so magical because you could literally see, you didn't hear Mark, that's the dad's name, I believe, you don't hear him say something immediately, but you hear the gravel of like, oh my God, of them turning quickly to look at Louisa and be like, did you just say what I thought you said? So that was crazy to know that like Charles once again poured his heart and soul into creating the sound design, because I'm telling you, if you guys heard the version that I heard before we lost it, like we were so close. We were like inches away from like the finish line. We just needed music and some composition, and it was heartbreaking. But then I heard the next versions and I was like, okay, wow, he somehow one upped himself. That's crazy.
Yeah, I took whatever the last pass that I had sent for notes, and I just brought that into the session and tried to line up the pacing to that. But before I pulled all the effects back in and started rebuilding all those, I went back and just really drew out the pacing a lot more than it was on that last pass, so that we were able to like have more room to breathe. And that scene in particular was one where it was a lot more compressed before. And so I stretched out that, and then I think I tried to overlap some of those voices where it's just like something I wasn't really thinking about because I was just trying to get it together initially, but going back through and just trying to hit that same pacing and finding that there were moments that could be drawn out more, I think helped a lot.
Yeah. And I also
Everything.
feel like, you know, I think one of our conversations early in this process was like about making sure that we're not talking down to the audience.
Yeah.
That was like a big thing
Yeah.
that I think we even talked about,
Yeah.
was like saying, you know, we're not like, oh, isn't this an interesting night in Joshua Tree where we can hear the wind and the faint howl of a coyote. Don't you hear that? You know, and so it was always kind of like, okay, you know, we have to make sure that we build this world in a way that creates an emotional response always with every single scene.
Yeah.
And I think that was something that I also felt in the second pass of the tapes were so amazing, because I felt like, oh, like, you know, Charles really was able to, you know, I know you just said give more space, but actually I felt like you were able to tighten everything up. Like, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So like, I know we're almost saying the same thing, but I kind of felt like you were able to like do the bow around a lot of scenes,
Yeah.
so that we were able to, I could make sure that when I was listening to it, I was like, okay, if like, you know, Stacy from Nebraska is listening to this for the first time in like traffic, she's going to feel like, you know, the warmness of Sherry's Kitchen. She's going to feel the vastness of Joshua Tree. She's going to feel, you know, the anxiety of like those boots. So it was really great to hear it that second time around, because I just felt like everything was like tighter. Yeah.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Interesting how that immediate moment of panic and just like devastation turned itself into something that a product that you guys, it seems unanimously, are in agreement was better than where you were.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wild.
That is wild.
It didn't feel like that at first, though.
I'm sure it
I
did.
cried so hard that day.
Oh, I'm sure you all did. I'm sure you
I
all
mean,
did.
so
I'm
much,
sure
yeah.
you all did. But like, I'm curious actually, like from a creative point of view, do you feel like that gave you maybe like some, because you were working on this project a lot and you were doing a ton of editorial work, Charles, without Kim and Kat being present. I wonder if like the lost tapes kind of gave you a forced separation from the project, allowed you to step aside from it. That's what I'm thinking, but let me know if I'm on the right track. or
Yeah,
not.
I think especially in terms of like sound effects and all of that stuff, just because it took so much time to redo the dialogue editing and get that pacing to line up close to what it was, or if it was different, to make sure it was working, like to make sure those changes were intentional and not just an accident trying to throw it together. That when I got back to the sound design after that, there were a lot of ideas that had just been kind of simmering in the back of my brain, things that I had like tried out earlier on that I think we all were like, yeah, that works. But after just letting it simmer for a few months and going back to it and hearing it a bunch of times without that initial sound effects pass, then it was like, oh, you know what? Maybe we could try something else, something a little bit different. There, especially in the last episode of season 1, there were a bunch of moments like that I mean, were definitely sound effects heavy moments with Sherry.
Yeah.
And that first scene of that episode really was very different in how we discover that she's in this dream that seemed real. That ended up being one of the biggest changes from that earlier past to that.
Well, I'd love to talk actually about that dream scene because that was very different from the rest of Babalu. And it does have such a powerful message in it. So talk to me a little bit, Charles, about how you process that from a sound mixing perspective. And also, Kat and Kim, I'd love to hear from directing and from writing what challenges you experienced knowing that sound was going to have to do a lot of the heavy lifting of that part. But Charles, why don't you go first and just talk to us about your process with that scene?
I mean, for that scene, it was, I think when I first did it, I wasn't entirely sure how much of it was dream and how much of it wasn't. And we kind of talked about, like, how creepy do we want this moment to be? Like, how off-putting is this entirely in her head? Is this, like, her mind pulling in bits and pieces of what she's experienced? And I think in that earlier past, it was a little bit more straightforward, especially when she's out on the street and she's rushing for her car, and the stranger following her just didn't have that same eeriness for the listener. You could tell that, yeah, there's somebody chasing her and she's getting upset, but like going back to that, those footsteps started to, I mean, I added some layers to them that were not just footsteps, not just pure Foley, but like, you know, there were some just low effects hits and different things to build up those layers, and then I was able to kind of bring those up as we get into the more emotionally driven and versus like realistic editing that was happening for basically the whole first 7 episodes. It was fun to kind of play around with that a little bit more and to do some pitch shifting and other ways to just give some of the voices that you're hearing or that she's hearing in that moment more of an ethereal quality.
I remember listening to it first as a listener, and I went back and I was like, oh, that was so different. Like, even though I didn't have a visual component to it, I knew something was different about what I was listening to.
Nice.
And once I processed that it was a dream, I was like, oh, shit. I was really impressed, is what I'm saying.
Well, thanks.
I would love to hear from Kim and Kat kind of this question I was asking before, which is, how do you go about creating a story and writing a story and directing actors when you know there's this whole component that you aren't going to be able to see until much later? Like, what was it like knowing that writing Babalu, knowing that sound design was going to have to do such a heavy lift?
I mean, I'll just say point blank, like, I have so much trust in Charles and Kat that okay, so fun fact, when we recorded the pilot, we obviously did that separate. That was, years before the rest of the season. my friend Stephanie's in town. Charles is like, hey, I've got a decent draft of the pilot ready. Do you want to hear it? And I was like, yeah, sure. And he's like, great. You guys can come over. I was like, can I bring my friend? He's like, yeah, sure. So me and Stephanie roll up to his apartment in Koreatown. He plays it on his loudspeakers. I'll never forget. In his little, like, small, like, I'm assuming, like, your, what would you call it? Like, your post-production, editing
studio,
bay.
Yeah.
We were just sat there, and and he goes, okay, so, like, still rough. And I was like, all right, yeah, cool, dude. We were blown away. Like, truly, within seconds, I was like, ah! Like, I think I already, like, started to, like, cry, and, like, Stephanie was like, holy, like, and Stephanie she didn't know anything about the script. She was just like, sure, I'm visiting my friend, let me go listen to her podcast episode. And both of us just could not stop talking about it on the way home. I was just like, that was the rough, like, that's the rough. To me, like, we could probably could have launched it right then and there. I'm like, it's ready, let's go. So I had a lot of trust from the very beginning for Charles with sound. I had so much trust for Kat in getting the performances I knew we needed out of the actors. Like, it's I am a writer on this, and obviously I feel like I can hear the characters and the way I want things performed, but then you get in with the actor and sometimes they just do something that just totally blows your socks off because Kat gave them like one tiny redirection. And so it was easy for me, quite frankly, to feel like I can just hand this over, and it was just lovely to feel like I have this there's this wonderful collaborative spirit amongst the three of us in regards to, like, no hard feelings or anything. It's just like, hey, I think this will work. I don't think that will work. And there have been times where, like, we have disagreed, where we were like, oh, I think this will work. Oh, you don't think, actually, I think this would work. And then I was like, okay, I trust you. And sure enough, you were right. Like, one of them is actually Trey's voicemail. When we hear Trey's voicemail for the first time, we had the lovely Greg Smith record it a few different ways. And I think he improvises. Love you, Greg. I'm pretty sure he improvises where he goes, oh, Trey, for when you have reached the voicemail of, Trey, right? And so
that part did make me laugh out loud, by the way.
It makes
laugh out loud moment.
It got such a positive response when we played it live for our friends and family when we did the premiere. And Charles was totally right. He pushed back on me on that. He's like, I think you should keep it. I go, don't you think it's a bit awkward? He's like, no.
Oh, it's definitely awkward.
Yeah, exactly. But exactly. That's why the reason why to keep it, right? And I was like, all right. And I trusted him, and he was totally right. But that's just like one example that I can think of many examples where I think we were all just very open and could, like, push back and challenge each other. And it just felt like, I feel like you're in such a fantastic position when you can just hand something off to other people and go, please do your magic. And I trust that you're going to come back and with something amazing. And yeah, it happened several times throughout this process.
That's awesome. Kat, what about you? I mean, like, from a director point of view, like, I'm sure you're used to there being so many more visual components that you can lean on. And this was like all emotion. You were literally directing emotion and voice, right?
For sure.
So
I know we're going to get into that more, but especially for something, and we'll just kind of piggyback off the dream scene. Again, it's really trusting your collaborators and also knowing that you're just one piece of the puzzle. So I kind of felt like as long as I can give Charles pieces that I know he can choose, then, like, my job's done. So, like, an example was, like, I know when Sherry's really scared and going to the car, I knew I had to get one that was, like, over the top, one that was, like, under, one that was, like, more happy, and one that was more, like, a little bit sad. And so, like, I knew I had to, like, hit 4 separate things so that depending on which dream weird sound you used, I knew that one of those could fit in. Yeah. So sometimes it was like me almost knowing, and again, that is really from our previous relationship, but me knowing, like, as long as I get these 4 takes that I know Charles can use, that I know that I know his dream sound will work with one of these. So it's almost like going backwards. So it's almost like me being like, okay, I know that one of these will be good depending on which sound you choose.
Yeah, well, and that was super helpful too, because it was almost like getting a full palette of paint instead of just one color, where I could pick and choose different parts of each of those takes just to, like, hit specific emotional beats.
Yeah,
which was great to have those options. It meant that we didn't really have to choose, like, there weren't as many hard choices about, like, okay, well, I like this about this performance, but this about this performance. It was pretty easy to stitch them together in a way that we got, the best from everything, which was great.
I want to just like kind of summarize what I'm hearing here. It's like, so you guys kind of came together. You recorded this pilot, the first pilot, all together. So you were able to kind of create that connection, but you were all so mindful of each other's process. And I think that is really what set up Babalu for success, is that even though you all had very individual jobs, you were able to support one another in the decisions you make. I love that metaphor of it's like I had a whole palette of paints instead of just one or two to create a picture. And that so comes through in Babalu. We actually have a listener question for you, Charles. So this is from Reese, and they would like to know, what is the strangest, coolest, or most unexpected way you created a sound effect for the podcast?
Technically, some of the things in that final episode were very challenging, and, even in the past that got lost, R.I.P. Even in that, like, they were so different from how it ended up. And it was just like, okay, let's try this weird thing. That didn't work. Oh, let's try this weird thing. That's better in some ways, worse in others. And like, one of the things I loved most about like this collaboration is that I feel like I can mess up. I can push something and make big mistakes, and I trust that they're going to just tell me.
He makes no mistakes. He tries stuff, but not mistakes. There's no mistakes. And like, no,
But then, I mean, some of the weird things were like when it came to Foley. I mean, obviously, like I did in the beginning of that last episode, some of the footsteps have multiple layers of Foley on top of them to give them a little bit more of, a little bit more sinister nature to them, or, to add to the space, things that when I was recording the Foley weren't necessarily there.
And what do you mean by Foley for folks who don't know sound design?
Foley is just the actual recordings that I did. Mostly it's the footsteps, but then it's anything from
Korean barbecue.
Oh, right.
You grilled meat. This man
I did.
grilled meat.
I did record
for Korean barbecue.
Bulgogi.
Yeah, he actually did Korean food.
And I had to ask him to go get boba at some point and record that.
Oh,
because
yeah.
I didn't have boba in my town, and I didn't have a good enough recording of like, especially with the big,
the straw,
the
the
big boba straws.
I was like, yes, sir, I'll go record some boba. No
And then you're
problem.
like, where are you going, honey? Work.
Exactly. I'm
Working
busy. I gotta record boba.
So Foley is just encompassing all of the sounds that you record in order to tell the story.
Exactly. So it's I'm usually working from a mix of a large library and then layering those on with more unique things that have to go, directly the way that they happen in the story. And one of the things that made that process really work for me was in the scripts, there are things like character smiles or like the things that you would see in a script with visuals, Kim included in there, and that stuff was so helpful because even if it wasn't, it wasn't something that anyone would necessarily see, I'm sure it helped. I'm guessing it probably helped you, right?
Yes.
But I mean, just for figuring out, okay, how am I going to walk these out? And I think the weirdest part, as far as Foley, was we talked about in Gloria's story of these footsteps that are sticking to the floor, these heavy boots. The idea was to end the final episode with Sherry experiencing something somewhat similar with these heavy, sticky work boots. And you would think, oh yeah, I'll just get some work boots and walk around and maybe I'll get something sticky for the floor. And nothing I did made the surface sticky enough. So I whipped up a extremely sugary simple syrup. So like very thick.
He's
viscous,
dedicated, y'all. He's dedicated.
Poured it across the surface, let it dry, and then finally got that. And sure enough, by the next day, I still have not managed to get all this syrup off my Foley board because it's just caked on
Bill
there.
me for a new Foley.
those sticky footsteps, like that was so like like there were so many sounds in the entire series that just transported me into the story.
Yeah.
And I felt like I was walking alongside Louisa. I was in the room with her and Gloria. I can't believe you haven't even talked about Gloria.
know.
Yeah,
And
that
love
whole,
to get
that
that
whole story.
whole
is
episode
incredible.
with
there's so many things that we can get into. We only have so much time during today's recording, but it was just incredible work, my dude. Really. And one other thing I want to touch on before we go on to our next episode is you mentioned pacing. These episodes actually aren't that long. I don't think any of them breaks an hour. Maybe one of them does.
One does.
One breaks
Yeah.
an hour, but it's anywhere between like 35 and an hour, right? Something like
Yeah,
that.
yeah.
Even though you gave space you gave space, and I know you two were kind of like tightening, giving space. We breathed, we tightened. I just want to really compliment you on your ability to make it sound so real. And even though there was space in between dialogue and in between scenes, there was so much story crammed in just a handful of episodes.
Can I just like really truly like point out like Charles is a craftsman because yes, of course, Kat and I can, record till the sun comes up with the actors or whatever. But we know that obviously that the way the pacing is going to change, it's going to change regardless when we go into post. So our job, obviously, Kat's job, get the performances we need, get him the different palettes of color that Charles can work with. But ultimately, I could probably pull out how many times in the notes I said, more air, more air, more air for Charles, because there are moments where we're figuring out in real time. I'm not an audio fiction pro. Obviously, Charles knows sound design, but we were both figuring out how to tell a story with just audio only. And there were many moments where I was like, this is too fast. This needs to slow way the hell down. Like, especially for Sherry's tapes. I think all of my more air were probably for Sherry's tapes, simply because I want there to be like a moment where we just hear the tape run and we're just sitting with Sherry in silence and hearing almost hearing her work on her own thoughts before she says something. And I truly cannot give credit enough to Charles and how he paced everything out, because there were so many moments, I'm sure, in the very first drafts of notes where I was like, more air, buddy, more air, more air. I would even say I want this to be awkward. If it feels like it's too long, that's exactly where I want it to be.
Like the lullaby was one of those that I think got more air notes maybe 5 times in a row before I got it with enough air,
because it's such a beautiful scene. And I think there like Kat says, you're tightening, but you're giving space, which ultimately is tightening the story. I do think that there's so many there's so many cool things that can be done when you let the audience wander a little bit in the silence, and where does their mind go? Because I don't know about you, but I think sometimes now I'm so programmed with modern media where if there's even a moment of silence, I'm like, what happened? Something broke? Oh, the internet's down? Whatever. And I love when no, it's just silent. We're just supposed to be in this moment and just live in it, in this awkwardness. And so I really, truly have to thank Charles for pacing. And also too, I want to say this really funny anecdote real quick. When episode 8, I'm pretty sure the 3 of us met on Zoom, and I was like, okay, so this episode's crazy.
Yeah.
I was like, this is all right, Charles. I think I warned him. I was like, okay, this is gonna be nuts. I'm gonna need a dream sequence at the top. There's also a bathtub scene that and what Charles brought to life for the bathtub scene. I remember listening to final drafts of episode 8. And I knew what was coming in that episode. I know she gets into the bathtub. She goes underneath. We know that she's going to have this moment where we hear the water. She's humming Billy Joel. And then that creepy voice comes in and says, go to sleep. And funny enough, that's me. That's my awkward voice that Charles manipulated in the craftsman he is.
Oh, I didn't know.
Yeah, go to sleep.
There's a few hidden cameos.
Yes.
Yeah, I am technically in episode 8 in that regard. But yeah, so we had that very creepy line that I know is coming. I wrote the scene. I know it's coming. And I remember being in my bed and I'm listening. I have headphones in. My partner's to my right, and he's doing his thing, and I'm just like, I literally like gasped when we hear the voice say "go to sleep" because it's so creepy. Like the way you have the voice like come in and all encompassing, like with the bathtub sounds was just freaking unreal. And having Sherry come out of the water and go hello, and her wet feet walking around that like the apartment, I was just blown away, and I knew it was coming. Like I knew it was coming, but that's how good he is at his craft. That like it just rocked me. Like I like my boyfriend's like, are you okay? Because I was like and I was like, oh my god, I can't tell you this yet, but something happens in episode 8 and it's gonna be crazy. Yeah,
I want to call out something that you started with just in your last anecdote. I think it was such a risk to take your time with the show, especially in the age of media that we are in now. And I think that is a risk that paid off, as is evident by the feedback you've gotten from Babalu and the recognition you've gotten for it. I really feel like the show and the sound that was in it made us feel as listeners like we were alongside. I could visualize everything. And there was at no point as a listener where I was like, come on, Louisa, like get to it or whatever. Like it was just, it felt so intimate. And I sometimes think, like reflecting back on the show, that maybe not having the visuals allowed that intimacy to happen because you're listening more closely.
Yeah.
But I don't know, maybe we'll have to get into that on the next mini episode. Charles, you killed it. But this next mini episode is going to be all about directing. And that concludes this episode of Babalu B-Sides. Keep an eye out on your feed for the next episode where we'll dive into directing the performances that brought Babalu to life. Want to contribute directly to the show? Go to buymeacoffee.com/Babalu. 100% of the proceeds will go to creating the next installment of this incredible series.